Hey, Brian from SnakeBytes here. In this week's show, I'm going to share my love for the big pythons. Buckle up, this could get interesting. You're watching SnakeBytes. My passion for big snakes really started at a young age. I've told the story many times that my very first snake happened to be a Burmese python. Now, I've told it a ton of times, and I don't think that that's a great starter snake whatsoever, but it really started my lifelong passion for these amazing animals. I've been keeping and breeding the monster big snakes ever since. Believe it or not, at one time, I had over 100 big snakes in my collection. Now I just keep a handful of Burmese and retics, but Burmese pythons are where it all started for me. And this girl's name is Deborah, and she's a great example of how each snake has an individual temperament. Believe it or not, this puppy dog snake here is the sister to the infamous Satan that certainly doesn't have that type of temperament. According to the Guinness Book of World Record, what species has the title for the longest snake in the world? A, reticulated python, B, anaconda, or C, African rock python? Go ahead and answer in the comments down below and check back later in the show to see if you have the right answer. In this week's Reptile Report Spotlight, we'll be highlighting monitor lizards. Go ahead and check out the URL down below or click on the link in the description. This happens to be a granite Burmese python. Now, I remember when the very first granite Burms came into the country, a guy named Eric Kreider imported them, and I was at a reptile show, and he showed them to me in his hotel room, and I was absolutely blown away. They're a recessive mutation, which basically just means when you breed them to a normal, all the babies are going to come out normal, carrying the trait for granite. Now, over the years, there's been some incredible mutations, like the fire granites and albino granites. I tell you what, I sure do miss hatching Burmese pythons. Of course, this is one of my mascots. Her name is Sunshine, and she's an albino Burmese python. Now, I take this girl all over the place to kids shows just to show how incredibly docile she is. And as you can see, she absolutely loves people to death. Now, Burmese pythons can get pretty large. Believe it or not, there was a Burm up in Minnesota that was 400 pounds. Now, Sunshine's about 5 years old. She's probably only about 70 or 80 pounds. And to be honest with you, we don't feed her a whole lot because we want her to stay roughly about this size. Now, she's going to grow each year, but we don't want her to get 200 or 300 pounds because, again, when I take this girl around kids, I want them to be able to get hands-on with her and just pet her and pick her up and see how incredible of an animal she actually is. Ah, of course, this is my girl, Satan. Now, she's a handful, to say the least. You can always tell she wants to bite you as soon as you open up the cage, but I absolutely love her attitude. She's such an amazing animal. And now, a lot of people will ask why I keep this animal in a smaller cage. Believe it or not, we've continuously tried to move her into bigger cages, and she's always just gets so mad she pounds her face against the glass, and she won't stop until her face is all bashed up. As soon as we put her back in this cage, she's just a puppy dog again. And as you can see, she is definitely feisty, but man, I just love her attitude. She's definitely one of my favorite snakes, and she's so predictable all the time. But you can see Burmese pythons are truly incredible animals. Now, I've only been keeping reticulated pythons for about 7 years, but they are amazing animals. They're very different than Burmese pythons. They seem to be much more intelligent, and they certainly move around a lot more, so they're a bit more of a handful. As a matter of fact, their intelligence is a little bit sketchy, because every time you open the cage, you never know what you're gonna get. One day, they're just puppy dog tame. The next day, bam, they're going right for your face. But the truth is, reticulated pythons are some of the most beautiful snakes out there. Now this happens to be a tiger reticulated python, which is a codominant mutation, meaning there's a super form, and the super tigers are unbelievably breathtaking. They're basically patternless with just a couple stripes, and man, that color is absolutely incredible. Now reticulated pythons get really large. They can actually get in the mid-20s as far as feet go, so they're definitely a monster snake. But I tell you what, look at that gorgeous animal. Now this is an amazing snake. It's a lavender albino reticulated python. It's a recessive trait, so it's relatively easy to make. But when the first albino came into the country, it was a male, and believe it or not, it had a broken back. So no one knew if they could ever reproduce them. And Bob Clark, amazingly enough, bred that male snake and produced some heterozygous offspring, and eventually produced this amazing piece of living art. Reticulated pythons have certainly caught my fancy over the last few years. I don't know what the future holds for BHB and retics, but I can tell you this much, I absolutely love them to death. Listen, I don't think that big snakes are for everybody, and I certainly think before you jump into one of the monster giants, you need to get experience with smaller snakes and even mid-sized snakes. Now, we have a policy here at BHB that always have at least 2 people working with these snakes at each time. It's important to have a protocol in case something goes bad. Now, I've never been to the hospital for a bite, but over the years, I've had some pretty nasty hits for sure. Listen, all snakes are amazing, but there's something truly breathtaking about the giants. Whenever I do an entertainment show or an educational show, I always get the most oohs and ahs when I pull out a giant python. Feeding snakes is always amazing, but feeding these large pythons is an exhilarating experience. You really get the sense of power these guys have. Just take a look at the speed and energy they put into grabbing their food. Trust me, I've been on the wrong end of these bites, and today is a bad day to be a rabbit. If a giant snake is in your future, I cannot stress enough to recommend starting with something that's a little bit mid-sized before moving up. Take, for instance, this boa constrictor. It's a perfect option for something like that. Now, boas are still gonna get 8 and sometimes even 10 foot in length, so it gives you a great opportunity to work with a mid-sized, kind of bigger snake and get all the experience you need before making that next level. Now, the next step up from there, maybe, is a dwarf retic. Like I was saying, dwarf retics are an awesome option for that next step up from something like a boa constrictor. Now, this happens to be a full-size 5-year-old dwarf retic male. As you can see, it's a relatively handleable animal. It might be about 9, maybe even 10 foot long, but not really heavy-bodied. And again, it's a great opportunity to get experience with the way they move, the way they act. Because when you're working with big animals like the big pythons, it's so important to read them, to try to be one with the animal. That way you know what's going to happen and you can anticipate anything that they're going to do before they do it. So getting a dwarf retic is a really great option, and I tell you what, this is one beautiful snake. Is there a future for these big snakes? Sadly, I've got to say, I'm not sure. You guys may know that the Burmese python about a year ago was added to the Lacey Act, which basically makes it a felony to cross state lines with the animals. What has this done? It's actually caused people like myself to stop breeding these amazing animals. I've been breeding these guys since I was 17 years old, and the last 2 seasons is the first time I haven't bred Burmese pythons. It saddens me so much to think that within the next 15 or 20 years, when girls like Deborah are gone and dead from old age, I may not be able to have a Burmese python in my collection. Recently, there was a scaleless Burmese python that was hatched. I would love to own it, but unfortunately, I can't import it, and it pains me. And unfortunately, animals like reticulated pythons and boa constrictors
sadly might be added to the Lacey Act as well. So what can we do? We can educate people on how beautiful these animals are and make people realize that they're not the killers that the media sometimes portrays. You can also join organizations like USARK. They're fighting for our rights to keep not only these big, amazing animals, but to keep all animals, bearded dragons, leopard geckos, ball pythons, and corn snakes. Please join organizations like USARK. Donate as much as you can to save the future of our reptile hobby. And remember, keep telling people to keep the passion for these amazing animals.
Dude, it's so freaking hot. Roasting. It's like 87 in here. Roasting all day. Had it with this heat, guys. I got the perfect solution. What do you have in mind?
According to the Guinness Book of World Record, what species has the title for the longest snake in the world? If you said A, reticulated python, you're 100% correct. Good job.
Hey guys, keeping big snakes is fun, but it's a lot of work. Those big rabbits come out pretty nasty on the other end, and it's a pretty dirty job. I know not all people can handle that kind of dirty job, so I want to know, what is a dirty, gross job that you just don't think you could ever do? Leave a comment below and let us know.
So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Those big snakes are so amazing. And as always, I'm Facebooking and tweeting pictures all the time. So make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites.